Wife's shocking affair with daughter's boyfriend ends in brutal murder. A picture-perfect family, the Andersons were the epitome of suburban bliss. From the outside looking in, their lives seemed to be plucked straight from a Norman Rockwell painting. Sarah, the matriarch, was known throughout the neighborhood for her warm smile and her famous apple pies that always seemed to find their way to new neighbors' doorsteps. Her husband, Michael, was a respected high school English teacher, beloved by students and faculty alike for his passion for literature and his ability to inspire young minds. Their daughter, Emily, had just turned 18 and was in her final year of high school. With her mother's golden locks and her father's piercing blue eyes, she was the perfect blend of her parents' best features. Emily was an honor roll student, captain of the debate team, and had recently started dating Tom, the quarterback of the school's football team. The Anderson home was a hub of activity, always filled with laughter and the aroma of home-cooked meals. On weekends, the family could often be seen tending to their immaculate garden or hosting barbecues for their neighbors. Their involvement in community events was legendary, from organizing the annual book drive for the local library to leading the neighborhood watch program. Sarah's best friend and next-door neighbor, Lisa, often remarked on the family's close bond. "I've known the Andersons for over a decade now, and I've never seen a family so in tune with each other," Lisa shared in an interview. Sarah and Michael still look at each other like newlyweds, and Emily? Well, she's the apple of their eye. You can see how proud they are of her every time she walks into a room. The family's peaceful home life was a testament to their values. Their living room walls were adorned with family portraits spanning generations, each telling a story of love and togetherness. The kitchen was the heart of their home, where homework was completed at the large oak table while dinner simmered on the stove. It was here that the family shared their daily triumphs and challenges, always supporting one another with unwavering devotion. As the story unfolds, we see snapshots of their idyllic life. Michael grading papers by the fireplace, Sarah tending to her prized roses in the garden, and Emily and Tom studying together on the porch swing. These moments, captured in warm, soft focus, paint a picture of domestic harmony that seems unshakable. Little did anyone know that beneath this veneer of perfection, a storm was brewing that would test the very foundations of their seemingly unbreakable bond. 2. The secret affair begins. It started innocently enough. Sarah had always been friendly with Emily's boyfriends, wanting to make them feel welcome in the Anderson home.
But there was something different about Tom.
Maybe it was his boyish charm or the way he carried himself with a confidence beyond his years. Whatever it was, Sarah found herself drawn to him in a way that both excited and terrified her. Their first encounter alone was purely coincidental. Sarah had stopped by the school to drop off Michael's forgotten lunch, and she bumped into Tom in the empty hallway. Their conversation was light, filled with laughter and an undercurrent of tension that neither could quite explain. As they parted ways, both felt a spark that they knew they shouldn't pursue, but couldn't ignore. Over the next few weeks, these chance encounters became more frequent. A quick chat at the grocery store, a brief meeting at the local coffee shop, each interaction deepening their connection. Sarah found herself looking forward to these moments, her heart racing whenever she saw Tom's car parked outside their house. The affair officially began on a rainy afternoon when Emily was at debate practice and Michael was stuck in a faculty meeting. Tom had come over to pick up a book he'd left behind, and in a moment of weakness, Sarah invited him in. One thing led to another, and before they knew it, they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. As the affair deepened, so did the emotional strain on Sarah. She was racked with guilt, unable to look her daughter or husband in the eye. Her once vibrant personality began to dim, and those closest to her started to notice the change. Lisa, ever observant, sensed that something was amiss. Sarah wasn't herself, she recalled later. She seemed distracted, almost jumpy. I asked her if everything was okay, but she just brushed it off, saying she was tired from all the volunteer work. The secret meetings became more frequent and more dangerous. Sarah and Tom would steal moments together whenever they could. A quick rendezvous at a motel just outside of town, passionate embraces in the darkened corners of the local park. Each time, Sarah would return home feeling a mixture of exhilaration and crushing remorse. Tom, for his part, was equally conflicted. He genuinely cared for Emily, but found himself irresistibly drawn to Sarah. The thrill of the forbidden affair was intoxicating, but the weight of betrayal grew heavier with each passing day. As weeks turned into months, the emotional toll began to show. Sarah's relationship with Emily became strained, their once close bond fraying at the edges. Michael noticed his wife's distant behavior but attributed it to stress from her increased community involvement. In quiet moments alone, Sarah grappled with the consequences of her actions. She knew the affair had to end, but the thought of letting go of Tom filled her with a sense of loss she couldn't bear. The moral conflict tore at her soul, threatening to unravel the very fabric of her family life. Little did Sarah know that her carefully constructed web of lies was about to come crashing down, bringing with it a tidal wave of heartbreak and devastation that would change their lives forever. 3. The affair is exposed the day the truth came to light began like any other. The Anderson household bustled with its usual morning routine, Michael rushing off to an early staff meeting, Emily gathering her books for school, and Sarah preparing for a charity event. The facade of normalcy was about to shatter in the most devastating way. It was Emily who stumbled upon the truth. She had forgotten her debate notes and returned home unexpectedly. As she entered the house, she heard hushed voices coming from the kitchen. Curious, she crept closer, her heart pounding in her chest. What she saw next would be forever seared into her memory. Her mother, Sarah, locked in a passionate embrace with Tom, her boyfriend. The world seemed to stop spinning as Emily let out a gut-wrenching cry. Sarah and Tom sprang apart, their faces a mix of shock and guilt. "Emily, honey, I can explain," Sarah began, her voice trembling. But Emily was already running out of the house, tears streaming down her face. The news spread like wildfire through their tight-knit community. Neighbors who had once looked up to the Andersons now whispered behind closed doors. The family that had seemed so perfect was now at the center of a scandal that no one could have imagined. Michael learned of the affair from a devastated Emily, who had sought refuge at her best friend's house. His reaction was one of stunned disbelief, followed by a deep, soul-crushing pain. "I felt like I couldn't breathe," Michael later confided to a close friend. "It was as if my entire world had been a lie." The emotional fallout was immense. Emily, feeling betrayed by the two people she trusted most, isolated herself from everyone. Her pain was palpable, a mix of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. "How could they do this to me?" she sobbed during a counseling session. "My own mother and Tom. I trusted them both." Sarah, stripped of her perfect image, faced the harsh reality of her actions. The look of betrayal in her daughter's eyes and the silent pain etched on her husband's face were constant reminders of the damage she had caused. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper during a tearful interview. "I lost sight of what was truly important, and now I've lost everything." Tom, caught between his feelings for Sarah and his guilt over betraying Emily, became a pariah in the community. His teammates shunned him, and he was asked to step down as quarterback. The promising future he once had now lay in ruins. The public's reaction was a mix of shock, disappointment, and morbid fascination. The Andersons, once held up as a model family, were now the subject of gossip and judgment. Some expressed sympathy for Michael and Emily, while others couldn't help but speculate about what had led Sarah to stray. As the dust began to settle, the family was left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The home that had once been filled with laughter and love now echoed with silence and pain. The road to healing, if there was one, seemed long and uncertain. The exposure of the affair marked the end of life as the Andersons knew it. What lay ahead was a journey through the darkest depths of human emotion, a test of their resilience, and a reckoning with the consequences of betrayal. For rage and jealousy boil over in the wake of the affair's exposure, the Anderson household became a pressure cooker of emotions. The once harmonious family unit was now fractured, each member grappling with their own turbulent feelings. Emily, still reeling from the betrayal, swung between bouts of rage and deep depression. Her academic performance plummeted, and she withdrew from her extracurricular activities. "I can't stand to be in the same room as her," Emily confided to her school counselor, referring to her mother. "Every time I look at her, all I can see is her with Tom." The young girl's pain manifested in sharp outbursts followed by periods of stony silence. Michael, the steady rock of the family, found himself on shaky ground. His initial shock had given way to a simmering anger that he struggled to contain. Colleagues at the high school noticed a change in his demeanor. "Mr. Anderson used to be so engaged with his students," one teacher remarked. "Now, he seems distant, like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders." But it was Sarah who bore the brunt of the family's collective pain. Ostracized by her friends and facing constant reminders of her betrayal at home, she spiraled into a deep depression. The woman who once radiated warmth and confidence now moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes hollow and her shoulders slumped with the burden of guilt. Dr. Evelyn Chen, a family psychologist consulted by the Andersons, provided insight into the family dynamics. "What we're seeing is a textbook case of how betrayal affects family units," she explained. "Trust, the foundation of any relationship, has been severely damaged. Rebuilding it, if possible at all, will take time and tremendous effort from all parties involved." The psychological impact of the affair manifested in various ways. Michael threw himself into his work, often staying late at school to avoid coming home to the painful silence. Emily's jealousy and sense of betrayal led her to lash out not just at her mother, but at her friends who tried to offer support. "You don't understand," she would scream. "How can you possibly know what this feels like?" Sarah, in her moments of reflection, grappled with the enormity of her actions. "I look at what I've done to my family, and I don't recognize myself," she admitted during a therapy session. "How could I have been so selfish? So blind?" The tension within the household was palpable. Family dinners, once a time of connection and laughter, were now endured in uncomfortable silence or punctuated by heated arguments that would erupt from the smallest provocation. The emotional minefield that their home had become left everyone on edge, never knowing when the next explosion of anger or tears would occur. Tom, though no longer welcome in the Anderson home, was not spared from the fallout. His attempts to apologize to Emily were met with scorn and, on one occasion, a slap across the face. His own family struggled to come to terms with his actions, the disapproval in his parents' eyes a constant reminder of his mistake. As weeks turned into months, the initial shock of the revelation began to subside, but the underlying issues remained unresolved. The family teetered on the edge, each member unsure of how to move forward, yet unable to let go of the past. Dr. Chen warned of the dangers of letting these emotions fester. Unresolved feelings of betrayal and jealousy can lead to long-term psychological damage, she cautioned. It's crucial for each family member to work through their emotions in a healthy way, or the consequences could be severe. Little did they know that their failure to address these boiling emotions would soon lead to a tragedy that would change their lives forever, pushing them beyond the breaking point and altering the course of their family's history. 5. The tragic event, the tension that had been building in the Anderson household, finally reached its breaking point on a cold, rainy night in November. What began as another strained family dinner escalated into a heated argument, with years of pent-up emotions pouring out in a torrent of accusations and tearful recriminations. Emily, unable to bear the suffocating atmosphere any longer, stormed out of the house despite the inclement weather. Sarah, desperate to make amends, followed her daughter into the storm. Michael, his own emotions in turmoil, hesitated before grabbing his car keys to search for them. What happened next would forever be etched in the memory of the small town. In her distressed state, Emily had wandered onto the rain-slicked highway. Sarah, catching sight of her daughter in the distance, ran towards her. Neither of them saw the truck approaching, its driver struggling with visibility in the downpour. The screeching of tires and the sickening thud that followed shattered the night. By the time Michael arrived on the scene, it was too late. Sarah lay motionless on the asphalt, having pushed Emily out of the truck's path at the last moment. Emily, physically unharmed but in a state of shock, knelt beside her mother's still form. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the community. The same neighbors who had been whispering about the family's scandal now gathered to offer support and condolences. The school where Michael taught and Emily attended was quiet and somber, a pall of grief hanging over the hallways. Detective Laura Martinez, the lead investigator on the case, spoke to the press with a heavy heart. "This is a tragic accident that has devastated a family already going through a difficult time," she stated. "Our hearts go out to the Andersons as they navigate this unimaginable loss." The days following the accident were a blur of grief and disbelief. Michael, now a widower, struggled to process the loss of his wife despite the pain of her betrayal. "I never got the chance to," he would start before breaking down, unable to finish the thought. Emily was inconsolable, racked with guilt over her last angry words to her mother. "She saved me," she repeated through her tears. "After everything, she still saved me." The complex mix of love, anger, and now grief overwhelmed the young girl, leaving her emotionally paralyzed. Tom, upon hearing the news, was struck by the finality of it all. His attempt to visit the family and offer condolences was met with a firm but gentle refusal from Michael. The young man was left to grapple with his role in the events that led to this tragic outcome. As the family prepared for Sarah's funeral, the town rallied around them. The same community that had been torn apart by the scandal now came together in mourning. Flowers and cards piled up on the Andersons' porch, each one a testament to the impact Sarah had had on people's lives, despite her recent mistakes. The funeral itself was a somber affair, attended by hundreds. As Michael and Emily stood by the graveside, their pain was palpable. The pastor spoke of forgiveness and the complexity of human nature, his words a balm to the raw emotions of the mourners. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the Anderson family was left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with the daunting task of healing not just from the loss of Sarah, but from the wounds that had been festering long before that fateful night. As the town began to move on, the Andersons remained at the center of a tragedy that served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the far-reaching consequences of our actions. 6. The aftermath and reflection in the months following Sarah's tragic death, the Anderson family and the entire community were forced to confront the lasting impact of betrayal, the power of forgiveness, and the long, difficult journey of healing. The legal proceedings that followed the accident were mercifully brief. The truck driver, devastated by his role in the tragedy, was cleared of any wrongdoing. The courtroom, usually a place of adversarial conflict, instead became a space for collective grieving. Michael, in a moment of grace that surprised many, publicly forgave the driver. "There's been enough pain," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah would have wanted us to find a way forward. As the legal chapter closed, the Andersons faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives. Emily, still struggling with the complex emotions surrounding her mother's death and the affair, agreed to see a therapist. Dr. Lydia Wong, a specialist in adolescent trauma, worked patiently with Emily to navigate her grief and guilt. Emily's case is particularly challenging, Dr. Wong explained in a later interview. She's dealing not only with the loss of her mother, but also with feelings of betrayal and anger that weren't resolved before the accident. It's crucial that she learns to separate these issues and address them individually. Michael, too, sought professional help to process his conflicting emotions. He found solace in a support group for widowers, where he could share his unique story without judgment. "I never thought I'd be in this position," he confided to the group, "mourning the woman who betrayed me, yet still loving her. It's a daily struggle to reconcile these feelings." The community's response in the aftermath of the tragedy was a study in human compassion. Many of those who had been quick to judge the family during the scandal now reached out with offers of support. Meals were prepared, lawns were mowed, and a college fund for Emily was quietly established by the school's PTA. Tom, grappling with his own guilt and grief, made the decision to leave town for college earlier than planned. Before he left, he wrote letters to both Emily and Michael, expressing his deep remorse and taking full responsibility for his actions. While the letters went unanswered, both Emily and Michael admitted to their therapists that Tom's words had helped in their healing process. As months turned into a year, Subtle changes began to appear in the Anderson household. The silences became less heavy, and moments of levity, though rare, were no longer tinged with immediate guilt. Emily, inspired by her therapy sessions, began to consider a future in psychology. "If I can help even one person navigate the kind of pain I've been through," she said, "maybe some good can come from all of this." Michael, finding renewed purpose in his teaching, started a grief counseling program at the high school. His openness about his own struggles helped create a safe space for students dealing with loss and trauma. "Sarah always said I had a gift for connecting with students," he reflected. "I think she'd be proud of this." On the anniversary of Sarah's death, the Andersons made the difficult decision to hold a small memorial service. To their surprise, the event turned into a community gathering, with friends, neighbors, and even some former critics coming together to remember Sarah. Not just for her mistakes, but for the entirety of her life. Lisa, Sarah's once estranged best friend, spoke at the service. "Sarah wasn't perfect," she said, her voice wavering. "None of us are. But she was kind, she was generous, and in the end, she gave her life for her child. That's the Sarah I choose to remember." As the sun set on that poignant day, Emily and Michael stood together at Sarah's grave. The anger and resentment that had once threatened to tear them apart had slowly given way to a deeper understanding and a strengthened bond. "Do you think she can see us, Dad?" Emily asked softly. Michael put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "I'd like to think so, sweetheart. And I think she'd be proud of how far we've come." The story of the Andersons serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities of human relationships, the devastating consequences of our choices, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Their journey through betrayal, tragedy, and healing touched many lives in their small town and beyond, prompting discussions about forgiveness, redemption, and the true meaning of family. As Emily and Michael walked away from the cemetery that evening, their steps were lighter, their path forward clearer. The road ahead was still long, with many challenges to face, but they were no longer walking it alone. They had each other, they had their community, and they had the memory of Sarah, not as the woman who almost tore their family apart, but as the mother who, in her final act, had given them the chance to put it back together. In the end, the Anderson story wasn't just about the unraveling of a picture-perfect family. It was about the messy, painful, beautiful process of healing and the discovery that sometimes it's in our brokenness that we find our true strength.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.